preparing to live stream. Okay.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to say hello again. If you're back for another Power Skills session, this may not be your first today or may not be your first ever, but if it is, welcome. And you might be here because you saw that Jane would be here, and I don't blame you at all for coming to join us for that. So whether it's your first time or your 25th time, welcome. This is going to be a fantastic session. I can guarantee it. I was privy to the content before, and I know that if you're a manager, and even if you're not, but specifically if you're a manager, you're going to really get a lot out of this session. My name is Rosalia Felice, and I'm the manager at Career Advising and Transition Services at McGill School of Continuing Studies. And I'm here with my colleague, Emily.
Hello, welcome.
Who I'm sure you've had the pleasure of meeting before, who you may have met over the course of Power Skills or at the School of Continuing Studies in our office. So Emily is wonderful, and you'll see her in other sessions as well. She's actually going to launch a video that'll play for about a minute, and it's a land acknowledgement video, and we'll just talk about it briefly right after, and then we'll get right into our session. Thank you, Emily. If you've been to other Power Skills sessions, you know that CATS and the School of Continuing Studies is committed to playing this video and to have the land acknowledgement and acknowledge the land that we are on, probably all of us, whether, and I know some of you are not from Montreal, but certainly across North America and in places around the world, that we are not the original occupants of this land. And while playing a video might seem like a small thing to do, it is an important first step, which is why we do it. Land acknowledgements are a stepping stone to honoring broken treaty relationships, among other atrocities, some of which we've very recently seen in the news. So it is one important first step. And so thank you for listening to that video. And if you know what land you happen to be on, what is the original land, please feel free to put it in the chat. We welcome you to use the chat throughout to engage with each other. It's one of the things about Power Skills that we love is the connection between people. So feel free to chat amongst yourselves. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And as we will go on, we will take them at the end. And if you need a point of clarification at all, please let us know. Now it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Jane Reichman-Bantoff. She's a professional coach, consultant, facilitator, and speaker. She has more than 25 years experience in public and private institutions. And she began her career as a practicing lawyer, later transitioning to the role of coach, consultant, and facilitator. So if you are in the midst of a career transition, she's been there. She's a faculty member of the McGill Executive Institute, and her areas of expertise include emotional intelligence, leadership, coaching, team building, and organizational development. She's a consummate professional. I've known Jane for several years, and every interaction has taught me something about myself and has been very positive. And I know you'll get a lot out of this session. There's no doubt in my mind. She's certainly going to ask you to get involved at some point, so be ready to do that. I hope you've had your coffee. And Jane will tell you more about herself over the course of the next hour. So let us please warmly and enthusiastically welcome Jane Reichman-Bantoff.
Thank you so much, Rosalia. That's a warm and wonderful introduction, and I really appreciate it. And I have to say, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure right now. but thank you. So today we're going to be talking about leaders as coaches, and there's a whole paradigm shift going on right now where managers are moving from boss to coach. So we're going to dig into that together. But before we do that, I'd like you to check in and let us know how you're coming in today. Psychologists estimate that around 47% of the time, we're not in the present moment. We're thinking about something that happened in the past, or we're thinking about something that we have to do later. So we're not actually in the moment. So let's bring ourselves into this virtual room together. And I'd like you to share a few words to describe how you're feeling on chat, and just use some of these pictures here if you need them for an inspiration. And we'd love to hear from you.
Thinking about the weekend. I'm going to read out the answers as they come in.
Sure.
Open and ready to learn. Feel free, everyone, to just, could be a word, could be a few words, curious. I love that. Any other thoughts? Curious about this session, but also ready for the weekend. Excited. Feeling
Great.
awesome and very curious for this session. Excited to be here and absorbing the flow.
Okay, well, I'm excited to be here too. So that's great. So I think we're all kind of focusing on the top two pictures. Let's look forward to the weekend and some rest and relaxation. So today we're looking at leaders as coaches, and in particular, we're going to be looking at what is coaching. And we're also going to be looking at what is mentoring, because very often people confuse the two. We're going to be looking at what are some essential coaching skills of effective coaches. What are some different types of coaching that people engage in? And we're also going to look at why are we talking about this? What is driving this conversation? Because I'm having this conversation with you, and I've been having it with many other people in different organizations as well, where people are beginning to really recognize the organizational value of coaching. I think this was a really strong trend before the pandemic, but it's something that's become even more accelerated because of the pandemic, because managers, we can't expect our managers to be everywhere, and we can't expect them to have all the answers. So coaching is really a very effective way of building that capacity within the organization. And then if we have time, we're going to take a look at the G.R.O.W coaching model, which is a very proven and highly respected model that's being used. So coaching has exploded in the last decade in particular, and I just wanted to take a look at a few different types of coaching with you. So there's executive coaching, where we coach executives, and it can be in a variety of topics, anywhere from what are some of their strengths and challenges, how to work more effectively with their teams. One of the things that comes up very often, even with senior people, is what I've observed, is having difficulty delegating. And I have my own coaching and consulting practice, but I'm also on the coaching team of the McGill Executive Institute. So for the last few years, I've had the privilege really to coach people at every organizational level around the world. So I do see certain patterns repeating themselves. If we go to leadership coaching, that's exactly what it says. How do we help people build their leadership? And again, what are some obstacles that they might have to that leadership? So we take a look at that. A lot of it is around building self-awareness. Business coaching really speaks to helping people build their business in whatever way they need. So for example, if you need some help with sales, so there'll be some coaching around that. Career coaching speaks to what it says. Career coaching, you might want to switch to a new career, or you may want to just do something to improve the career track that you're in. So that's a very important part of coaching. And life coaching, work-life balance, connecting with your values, what's important to you. And team coaching is something that we're seeing more and more of these days. The team is really the fundamental work unit of the organization. And, there are specific do's and don'ts in terms of how to build effective teams. And I know for myself, I've been on a couple of teams in the past where everybody on the team was, really effective individually, but as a team, we weren't really pulling together well. So really being able to build an effective team is key, especially these days where we're all working in teams. So I just want to remind you that as we go through our session together, please don't hesitate to put comments into the chat, or if you have any questions in the chat, Rosalie is monitoring all of that and we'll be able to have a conversation around that. So today we're focusing on leaders as coaches, and we're focusing on building coaching abilities and competencies within the organization. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm hearing more and more about this. Coincidentally, I was just coaching somebody a couple of weeks ago, and she just had her review, and her leader, her supervisor, really number one, the top of her priority list is to become a better coach, because that's really what they're looking for from their people in that organization. So why is coaching becoming increasingly important? There are a lot of things that are going on within the workplace, and there are a lot of sort of trends and sort of systems that we're seeing happening. So just to take a look at a few of them, the workplace is changing rapidly, and it's been quite unpredictable, and change is a constant. And that's something that we've been seeing for a long time. We've been talking about the need to be proactive and to scan the environment and to be agile for a long time. And the pandemic has really brought all of that to the forefront. Who could have predicted what happened? Some people did, I guess. Some people may have predicted it, but overall it was a very rapid change, and we were all affected by it. And we look at technology. I mean, we're on Zoom right now. I know for myself, I used to give in-person workshops, and that's all switched to online now. We've been talking together on Zoom for the last 18 months. So technology is changing how we interact with each other in a very fundamental way. And the World Economic Forum stated that 2 of the top 10 competencies or skills that people need to have for the 4th industrial revolution, the digital revolution, which started in 2020, are people management and emotional intelligence. So the more that we bring technology into our organizations, the more that we're working with technology, the more we need to balance that with the human touch. And that's where coaching, I've seen coaching come in that way, in a very strong way. We're working in teams. You know, we've moved from working in organizations that were more siloed, and we're working in organizations that are more matrix now. So teams are matrixed. We're all working remotely, and we're going to be coming, some of us are going back to work slowly, mostly in hybrid situations, and that flexibility is really a requirement. So those changes are all fundamental, and, you know, I can't see them. I think they're just going to continue. We're also dealing with complexity that we may not have seen before, and challenges are complex with few single causes or solutions. And we've lived that as well in the last 18 months. So in the past, you know, we used to say history repeats itself, and now what we're saying is that hindsight is not necessarily a predictor of foresight. So we need to have organizations that are agile, that are scanning the environment, that can move fluidly and adapt to what's going on. And bottom line, for organizations to be agile, people must be agile. People have to be adaptable, because people make up the organization. So if you don't have those competencies, then it's really going to be very difficult for you to rise to the different changes that you have to face. So you need to have the systems and processes in place to ensure that people can be adaptable, but it's really important to be able to build this skill or help people learn to become more adaptable to different situations. So now we'd like to hear from you, and just if you could enter into the chat, what are some changes that you're seeing in your workplace since the beginning of the pandemic? So what is changing for you? How has this impacted you?
Bigger workload, working from home, using Teams, surge towards technology to communicate, people being much more clear about their needs, importance of management to trust employees, more questions about meaning, using Zoom, more technology, new ways of coaching and new topics, and mental well-being and balance with performance expectations, saving on commute time, using virtual meetings. I was hired during the pandemic, so I don't feel like I know my colleagues that much. Importance of setting boundaries, loss of the human touch.
Yeah.
For me, the work itself, from project management to teaching and coaching, so changes in working, issues with teams growing apart.
So it's clear that one of the things that we really needed to focus on is the human side of things throughout the pandemic. And, you know, from your answers, so you're on Teams a lot, surging towards technology, a bigger workload as well, and really important to maintain those boundaries between work and home life, because those have blurred considerably. And we're talking a lot more about well-being, and we're talking a lot more about connection. And one of the things that I am seeing is that people are connecting with each other on a different level, because we enter each other's lives in a different way. We're not all at the office. So, you know, when I'm coaching somebody who has set up their office in their family room, and I can see that there's an explosion of toys behind me, I get a sense of what they're dealing with, and I get a sense of some of their challenges. So I think that human touch has entered in that way, even though we are dealing a lot with technology. But very, very important to keep that in mind, and very, very important to keep well-being at the top of the list of priorities. So speaking more about the changing workplace, so as I mentioned earlier, you know, traditionally organizations were siloed, and so there was somebody in charge of each of the different areas. And what we're doing now is we're moving more to leaders as coaches. So moving from someone who is your boss and who would give you directives, more to leaders as coaches, managers as coaches, there to support and guide you and to help you find your own answers. And the result is engagement. The result is that employees do learn to adapt to constantly changing environments, because you're growing that capacity within yourself, as well, bringing innovation, energy, and commitment. And a lot of times, you know, the person who's being coached, you have the most information about what's happening, and you have the most knowledge about your own situation that might not be apparent to your supervisor. So that enables you to bring creative solutions to what your situation is, builds both individual and organizational capacity. And coaching really just changes the paradigm. It really shifts things. One of the maxims that we have in organizational development is people own what they create. So we're shifting from compliance to commitment through coaching. And I think one of the critical pieces of information to remember if you are managing someone is that you are, as manager, their primary factor in your employees' engagement and ultimately in their performance. So engagement is critical in terms of high performance, high productivity. It impacts, work attendance. So it is really, it's critical to be focusing on your employees' engagement. And managers account for at least 70% of the variance in a team's performance. So you as manager, you have the key role for the people that you report to. And we know quite well that in general, people don't leave organizations, they leave their manager. So I think we have a poll right now, Rosalia.
I'm going to be launching the poll now. Someone please let me know if you see it. It's been launched.
Yep, see it.
Perfect, thank you so much. I'll keep it on for a few seconds. And I'm going to end it in 20 seconds. Wonderful. Thank you for your answers. And I'm going to, do you want me to share the results, Jane?
Sure, please.
So Jane, we have 38% say they have a coach as a manager, 35% say they have a boss as a manager, and 27% say they have neither.
So interesting, right? Like there's a real shift there going on, that more people feel they have a coach as a manager than as a boss as a manager. And some people have neither one. So that's a little bit interesting as well. So thank you for that. That kind of gives us a sense of what's going on in your worlds. So if you could close that now, I'll just do this. All right. So Gallup really has a lot of information about what's going on in the global workplace. And they do a state of the global workplace report every few years. And they've come out with one very recently looking at what happened in 2020. So Gallup divides engagement into three categories. They say people are engaged. So these are people who are highly engaged and are enthusiastic about their workplace and about their work, and they're sort of psychological owners of their work. So these are people who add, there's discretionary effort, there's additional effort that's involved. Then they have people they indicate as being disengaged, and these are people who are clock watchers. You know, you come in, you do your 9 to 5 or whatever time slot you're in, but you don't do more. And then you finally have some people who are actively disengaged, and these people are extremely unhappy in their situation, and they can really create some issues in the workplace. They can affect other employees. So what they found in 2020, that 20% of the global working population is engaged. 1 in 5 people around the world are engaged. In Canada and the United States, it fared a little bit better, 34%. The United States, there's a higher rate of engagement than in Canada. So 1 in 3 people in the US are engaged, whereas 1 in 5 in Canada are engaged. So, I mean, that's enormous in terms of the impact that this has on performance, on productivity, on your lives in terms of being happy to go to work, because work is such a big part of most of our lives that if you're disengaged and if you're actively disengaged, it can be extremely difficult. The other factor to look at is that the largest generation in the workforce right now are the millennials. So the millennial generation makes up at least 50% of the workforce in the world. And what millennials are looking for, what they've indicated are not just nice to haves, but needs to have shifted from prior generations. And that also brings coaching very much to the forefront. So they're really interested and concerned about their development, about their career trajectory. And so here are some factors that build engagement, not just for millennials, but for everyone. Because I said before, you know, like technology may have changed, but our human needs haven't. So in particular, millennials are concerned about having opportunities for personal and professional development. They want to know what their career trajectory is almost from day one. There's a lot of ambition and a lot of wanting to do good in the world at the same time. So their values are very connected to their workplace and are critical for them to be living their values. Understanding the link between our work and the organizational mission, I think that's critical for everyone. Everyone needs to understand how they're contributing to the organization and what's the difference that they're making. So everyone should have a direct line of sight between what they're doing and the mission of the organization. And if you don't, you should make sure that you have that clarified. And if you're a manager for yourself, as well as for the people who report to you, it's really critical to have that connection.
Jane, we have a question. Liliana asks if the disengagement is related to working from home or additional personal commitments like children, etc.
What we found, okay, so the disengagement, actually what's been interesting is that there's been a slight uptick in engagement in the millennial generation during the pandemic because of that opportunity to work remotely and to work from home. I don't think the disengagement, I think the disengagement really is a result of how organizations are functioning and how organizations are managing their people. What we're seeing is that there's a much higher rate of engagement in Canada than the US. There's a much lower rate of engagement in Western Europe. I think the rate of engagement is something around 10, 11%. And what they're seeing is that the structure of the organization, the way it operates is key. in terms of people's engagement. So the more empowered people are, the more engaged they are. In Western Europe, it's still more traditional in terms of the hierarchical setups of organizations. And so consequently, the engagement level is lower. On the flip side, people in North America and Canada, where there's the highest engagement, are also experiencing the highest stress levels. And in Western Europe, they're experiencing low stress levels. So there's an interesting interplay between those two. Does that answer your question, Liliana?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Interesting stats, thanks.
All right. So ongoing performance conversations are key. People want to know how they're doing. People want to know what they're doing well, and people want to know what they need to improve on. And people would much rather get constructive feedback than no feedback at all. And in particular, millennials are really requiring more of these ongoing performance conversations. And, you know, coaching shouldn't be an event, or an annual performance review shouldn't be an event. It should be part of an ongoing conversation, a two-way conversation that you're having with your manager, with each other, about what's going well and what needs to improve and what can be done to do that. Frequent recognition is important for millennials. They want to know what their strengths are so they can continue to build them. I think we all like to have recognition. So really important to remember that for every constructive piece of feedback that you give someone, you should give them 4 positive pieces of feedback, because the constructive piece of feedback is going to stick to our brains. We're going to forget about the nice things that people say about us. We're going to focus on the one thing that we might not be doing well. So very important to balance that off. And well-being, I mean, that's one of the things that came up in the conversation that we had. Mental well-being, emotional and mental well-being, really important. And we're having a lot more, we're talking about that a lot more now than we did in the past, because we have those direct links to each other. And feeling supported is really key for millennials. Feeling supported, feeling like your manager has your back. I give a workshop on managing and leading. And one of the exercises that I do with the participants is that we look at 20 adjectives that have been put together after a global survey in terms of competencies of effective leaders. And I ask them to choose the top 3 competencies of a leader they would follow because they choose to follow that person, not because they have to follow them, but because they choose to. In the past, honesty was always number 1, but what I've noticed in the last few years is that support is number 1. So that question of support is really critical. So before we move into coaching and getting into more detail around that, I do briefly want to mention mentoring, because very often people confuse the two. So mentoring is really, the key goal here is to support and guide personal and career growth of the mentee. And people, when I'm coaching people, I often suggest or advise them to get a mentor, because a mentor can make, or mentors can make a tremendous difference in helping you upskill, in, if you get a mentor in your organization, helping you build awareness of how your organization operates and helping you develop in your own career path. So generally a mentor is someone who is experienced. They've lived some of the things that you're looking to experience, and they provide wisdom and guidance based on that experience. So mentoring does include some coaching. It's not just advising and counseling. Part of it as well is sponsorship, exposure, visibility, and the relationship is often a longer term commitment. One of the things that we're seeing now, though, is reverse mentoring, where younger people are mentoring and coaching older people on technology. So I think mentoring is something that nobody should shy away from. I really urge people to get mentors, and I've mentored young people in the past, and I can tell you that it's a win-win situation. It benefits both the mentor and the mentee, so don't be shy. So what is coaching? And I really love this quote. Herminia Ibarra and Ann Scular wrote this article, The Leader is Coach. And they say an effective manager is coach, asks questions instead of providing answers, supports employees instead of judging them, and facilitates their development instead of dictating what has to be done. So you get the general sense of the support, the non-judging, a very positive approach to working with people and coaching people. and being there to support them in their own development. And Sir John Whitmore, he's the one who developed the G.R.O.W coaching model along with his team, and hopefully we'll have a chance to look at that a little bit later. And I love his approach to coaching, and I love his approach to working with people. Again, there is a sense of unconditional positive regard. And what he said is coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance, because we all have that potential. And it's just helping people plug into that and find it. So helping people learn rather than teaching them. So it's a partnership and a collaboration and believing in their potential. So Sir John Whitmore went from being a race car driver, that was his first profession, to being, a world-renowned authority and thought leader on coaching. And I mean, I'm repeating myself, but it's a very positive view of people in coaching. And when you have that positive view, when you're working with people, when you're coaching them, they feel it and they know that it makes a difference. So sometimes when I'm talking about coaching and people will say, Jane, can I never give people the answer? Like, I've got so much I want to share. And I say, of course you can. So sometimes it's 100% appropriate to be directive and just give people the answer. They might be dealing with something new that they haven't really worked with before, or they may be, there may be not enough time to coach, because coaching does take time. So absolutely directive is important there. Laissez-faire is really when people are doing well on their own. They don't need you to coach them. So you sort of step back and kind of get out of their way. Non-directive is what we're talking about here. So that's asking open questions, helping people find their answers. And situational is really the sweet spot. That's where you want to be as a manager, as a coach, so that you can determine which of these different approaches is effective based on the situation you're in. But first and foremost, coaching is a relationship. It's really important to have a relationship with a coach, a good relationship. And the way that I always work is I always have a preliminary conversation with the person that I'm going to be coaching, potentially, to make sure that we're a good fit and to make sure that we can have that relationship. And if you're working as a manager and you have staff, that's a relationship that you're building. So we'd like to hear from you now, and think about a time in your life when you had a great coach who really helped you. It could have been your supervisor, a peer, your mom, your sports coach, whoever it was. And in the chat, could you please share with us, what did the coach do that was so effective, and what impact did this coach have on you?
So Jane, just to clarify, it's not necessarily, it could be a manager, but it could be a coach in any sense. Is that correct?
That's right. A
Okay,
coach in any
perfect.
sense, anyone that it could have been your Girl Guide leader, anybody.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So please go ahead and put that in the chat. Allowed me to explore, gave me clarity, empowered me, gave me confidence, infinite patience, encouraged me. Manager helped me get through communication issues I was having with another manager. Never felt frustrated after this anymore, communicating with the other manager. And since then, our work relationship is super good.
Excellent.
Changed my life, says Michelle. Admitted that they had weaknesses. Anything else? My swim coach, when I was a teenager, changed all my fears into goals for competition. 40 years and more, I still remember.
Yeah. No, it's incredible the impact that a coach can have on you. I do this exercise sometimes in my coaching workshops. And I mean, I've had people break down into tears, literally, and just say, I haven't thought about that person for 40 years and they made such a difference in my life. And I always tell people, you have that opportunity as well. And you don't have to be in a formal coaching relationship, but you can certainly find other ways to coach and be in other situations where you are coaching. And, when I was, my first career, as Rosalia mentioned, I practiced law for 13 years, 12 years of which I was in-house counsel for a major real estate developer. And I had the opportunity recently to thank my boss. And I thought back, I don't think I ever really thanked him. And he was a great coach. And you know, having the opportunity to thank him was a really nice experience for both of us. And when I thought back about him, I mean, somebody said infinite patience. He was infinitely patient with me. He supported me. And I knew he really cared about me. And I think that makes a huge difference. So you can give people constructive feedback. You can, you know, you can have those tough conversations with them. And if they know you care about them and that there's a relationship that is important to you as well, then I think it makes a huge difference. And everybody has an opportunity to be that change for other people.
And Jane, there's been more since then. Would you like me? Yeah, there's
Yeah,
been
please,
help me
please.
grow as a person, feel more confident, and working out imposter syndrome. Made me realize the power of my thoughts. Use the different responses you just showed depending on the situations we were in. So was flexible in that way. My coach was my salsa dance teacher. Her passion for profession is what made me grow. And Emily said, for me, the best coaches I've had were exceptional listeners and meticulous about tracking progress and issues to stay focused on achieving my goals. Help me grow my confidence.
That's a great segue to the next piece here, because we're going to be looking at what effective coaches do. So really, what do they do? And you brought up a lot of these here. Ask effective questions. Somebody talked about asking effective questions, and we're talking about questions. We want to, as a coach, you want to elicit information from the person you're coaching. You're going to want them to think about things in a different way. And a lot of people mention that in terms of what their best coach ever did. Listening is, I think, key. I would put that as almost number one in terms of a muscle to build. And actively listening, be very present and be very aware, not just of what the person is saying, but their body language, the tone of their voice. I've been coaching on Zoom now for a few years. And, you know, when we talk about being aware of and paying attention to nonverbal communication, it's a little bit more challenging on Zoom because we don't have, you can't necessarily have the same sense of the person as if you're in person, but it is pretty effective. And you still can have a really kind of intimate conversation when you're on Zoom. But again, you're thinking about the other person, you're not thinking about yourself. Giving and receiving feedback. So if you're a manager and you're working with staff, so give them feedback, let them know how they're doing. If you're a manager, and one of the things they found too is that the most effective feedback givers are the people who ask for feedback themselves. So it really becomes a two-way street. It really becomes a conversation of how we do things around here, and it becomes normal and natural. Remain neutral and non-judgmental. And, you know, sometimes people say to me, how can I be non-judgmental if I'm doing their annual review, or if I'm giving them constructive feedback? And here I'm talking about the person. So you're not judging the person for what they have or haven't done. You're looking at their behavior and you're talking about their performance. So in terms of who they are, there's still that, you know, positive regard. It's looking at what do they need to improve or do differently. Building rapport and empathy, I think, is important, very important. Being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And that's really what empathy is. It's not necessarily having to feel what they're feeling, but it's being able to understand what they may be feeling and what their perspective is. You don't need to agree with it, but being able to put yourself in their shoes is really important. And we've seen that more and more with the conversations that managers are having with their employees. And, you know, one of the engagement has actually grown in North America, just as stress has grown. But one of the things, you know, when I was doing some reading around this, and one of the thoughts around this is that because we're having these conversations about well-being, how are you doing? We're having conversations about the person. That's building more rapport and empathy. And comfortable with silence. That is a big muscle that I think a lot of people need to build, me included. I'm an extrovert, so if there's a space, I have a tendency to want to fill it. So I've really built that muscle to ask a question and pause and really focus on the other person and wait for them to answer.
Jane, there's a comment here from Liliana. She said she recently participated in a workshop about trauma-informed leadership. And she said it was very eye-opening and built on the points given here.
Interesting. If you don't mind putting in more information in the chat, I'd love to look that up. Thank you, Liliana.
And Guy asked a question, if that's okay, Jane.
Sure.
He said, do organizations quantify the costs of disengagement and investing appropriately towards solutions? Like, is this what you see?
I think some organizations do. I think larger organizations do. But I think I get one organization that I really like to use their information or plug into their information is Gallup. And if you look at Gallup and you look at doing the research that they're doing, the results that they have, they're coming up with a lot of that type of information where they can actually make very concrete what the loss in revenue is, or the loss in cost is, what the loss of disengagement is from a bottom line perspective as well. I think some larger organizations absolutely do that. They do. And we know very well that, you know, if we hire somebody and they leave, that there's a cost associated with that. If they leave because they haven't been onboarded properly and they're not engaged properly, and there are definitely salary costs associated with that. So it is important to make that concrete. Thanks, Guy. So what I'd like to do here is I'd like to continue looking at what are some things that effective coaches do. And as I'm going through this list, I'd like you to think about what are some of the things that you do well, and what are some of the things that you might need to improve a little bit. So first and foremost, be present for the other person and put away distractions. So on average, we look at our phone about 120 times a day. And even if you turn it over, it is still a cognitive distraction. So important to put that away. I was coaching someone who's a real star in her organization. She has a senior advisor. When they were meeting in person, she would come to his office and his desk would be clear, and he was just there to focus on her. So that's really important. Focus on what the team member is saying. We think 3 times as quickly as we can speak. So it's really normal while somebody else is talking, you're thinking about what you want to say. So be aware of that and put a pause on that and just really focus on the other person. The rule of thumb is around 25%. The coach should speak around 25% of the time, and the person being coached speaks around 75% of the time. So make sure that they're doing most of the talking. If you're doing most of the talking, you're not coaching them, you're advising them at that point. It might be appropriate in the context, but just to be aware of that. Ask open questions. So you want to elicit more information from people. So for example, do you like working with John? Is a closed question. It's yes or no, versus how do you like working with John? So you can get more information from that person. Can your team help you with this? Again, yes or no, versus where can you enlist some help with this? So this even gives you a broader scope of thinking than just focusing on your team. So we're going to go back. Help the team member find their own solutions. And we've been talking about that quite a bit. And, you know, it's understandable if you have a hard time not giving the solution. The fact is that people are promoted because they're excellent individual contributors. So then you get promoted to managing people, and it's a very different skill set. So, you know, and we also all have a tendency, we want to share our knowledge, we want to help people. So here it's important just to put a pause on that and know that you're helping the person by coaching them and not by giving them the answer. Don't interrupt, even if you think you know what they're going to say, because you really don't. They may go off in a very, very different, very different path. And I think Emily before said structure the coaching session to help them move from goal to action steps. That's effectively what you were saying, Emily, because you know, you have that conversation, you understand what the goal is, what's the context, what are potential options, and then what are you going to do? So you're helping the person you're coaching, moving to action and to effectiveness that way. So I think here we just want to hear from you. Maybe put one thing in chat, like what is the best thing here that you feel you do? What are you really good at? Are you good at asking open questions, not interrupting? What is that?
Best thing, structure. So far, that was fast. I don't know how you type that fast. Connecting people. Then I'll say mine is helping, where was I? Help the team member find their own solutions. We have somebody else who said that. Trying to listen. I like the trying. Help them find their own solutions again. Active listening, bringing people together.
Okay, super. So important for you, whether you're coaching or not, but just in terms of your normal communication when you're speaking with people, what are your tendencies? What are you good at? Anything else, Rosalia?
No, those were the ones. Helping team members find their own solution seems to be the most, the one that was most mentioned.
Thank you. Now let's look at what you need to improve. Where is there a muscle here that you feel you need to work on, that you need to build? And as I said, whether you're formally coaching or informally coaching or not, even in your communication style, what is something that you feel that you could be doing better?
I put structure coaching sessions, put away distractions, somebody said, very easily distracted. Ask more questions. Be comfortable with silence, don't interrupt, be comfortable with silence. Anything else? Ask open-ended questions, listening and structuring the coaching session. Also easily distracted, help them find their own solutions and structure.
Okay. What do you see coming up the most, Rosalia? Do you see one thing rising to the top?
Asking open-ended questions. Well, actually, there's three that come up a lot. It was being comfortable with silence, asking open-ended questions, and structure. Those seems to be the three that have come up often.
Okay, so let's just talk about being comfortable with silence then. What are some of the things that you think you can do for yourself to help yourself be more comfortable with silence? And you can put that in chat, or if somebody would like to speak to that, Rosalie is going to monitor that.
One person said count to 10. Another person said practice pausing. Another person said count till 5. Usually they'll start talking. Another person said breathe. Deep breathing. Eye contact. Expectant pause.
Okay. These are all great. I like the count to 10. I like the deep breathing. I think that's a really good way of helping you connect in the moment. Just taking that pause is so important. So building that kind of pause into your conversation is really key. And I think what happens too is the more that you do that, the more you're going to see how beneficial that is, because people really need time to think. And I think that one of the things that people really take away from coaching, if you're being coached and you feel that you're really being heard and you're really being seen and people are there for you, that in itself is builds engagement and can be a wonderful experience and certainly builds relationship. So
There's
I find,
oh, I'm so sorry, Jane. There's conversation in the chat around because Maha said that basically these are the same tools that they use in speech therapy with children.
interesting. Interesting. Thank you, Mela. So I'm going to move on and we're going to be looking, we'll look briefly at the G.R.O.W coaching model. I like this model a lot. I work with it as well. I work with different models, but I really do appreciate this one. It's simple. It's a proven, effective model. So let's take a look. So G.R.O.W stands for goal, reality, options, and way forward or will. So it's easy to remember that acronym and to walk through the 4 steps. So you start with goal and you really are asking, what is the goal? What does the coachee want to achieve? And you really begin with the end in mind. And the clearer the goal is, the more able the coachee will be to achieve it. So bringing clarity to that is really important. Different types of goals. It can be a performance goal, a developmental goal, a problem to solve, whatever it is. So in your role as coach, you help clarify the goal regarding their long-term issue. As well, it's important to ask them, what do you want to walk away with from this conversation as well, so that it's really very specific about what they want to discuss. So you help them with that. And this is really where you need to build a muscle, because I've seen it so many times and I've been tempted myself. Somebody asks you a question and you just want to give them the answer. So if you want to coach them, you have to bring the pause in right here and sort of put the brakes on and ask them what's going on for them. What is the context? What is the reality? So your role here isn't to solve the issue or problem, but to help the person being coached explore, recognize, and gain greater clarity. So you explore the content, what's happening for them. You help them elicit as much detail as possible. And it's also important to recognize the impact the issue is having on them and on others. It can be impacting them, it can be impacting their team, having impact on the organization, and so on. And just help them gain greater awareness and clarity around the issue. The reality is an important element to focus on. Very often, change is hard. So it's important to really show people or help them discover for themselves how it's important to make that change, how you're doing it for a reason, and to staying in the current reality is painful, could be potentially painful for you. So you can ask some questions like, how serious, urgent is this on a scale of 1 to 10? And that'll help them gain clarity around that. What will happen if this situation doesn't change? How will this impact you, your team, your goals, and so on, so that they're more inclined to move forward with the coaching solution. Then you look at their options, and here you're not trying to find the perfect option or the key option. What you're trying to do is you're trying to help the person discover a variety of options. It's a brainstorming situation. So you're not looking for the right answer, but you're trying to create as many alternative courses of action as possible. And again, here's where the relationship comes in. Here's where the silence comes in. You ask them to explore an option. They give you an option, you pause. You ask them what else is there that you can look at. So you really try to create an environment where the team member feels safe to express their thoughts, again, without judgment. And so once the team member has finished, brainstorming their potential options, this is yes, where you can come in and offer your ideas. So you can add options to what they have to say, but don't do it before that. I was coaching somebody a few weeks ago, and he's dealing with a very sensitive situation. And he had come up with 2 options, option A or option B. And as we were talking, he asked me, he said, Jane, what do you think I should do? Should I go with option A or option B? And I really thought he should go with option A, but I didn't want to say anything. So I said, well, what is your gut telling you? And he thought for a moment. He said, I think I should go with option B. And that was really important for me not to have given my thinking to him. It might have confused him or maybe put him in the wrong direction. And he had a lot more information that he hadn't shared with me that was relevant to his choice, and he was absolutely making the right choice. And then finally, the last point is way forward and what will you do? So here, your role is to help the person define their action plan and commitment. So help them review the options they've examined, and what you're doing is you're converting a discussion into a decision. So help them come together with an action plan as detailed as possible. It's often very helpful for you to say, I want you to, come back to me and let me know how things went, and if there may be further coaching that's necessary. And I think I always ask people that I'm coaching, especially at the beginning, how was this for you? What worked well for you and what didn't? Because different people like to be coached in different ways. So it's nice to get feedback on that so that you'll be on the same wavelength. So I see that we have 3 minutes left.
Yes, do you have time for one question, Jane?
I do, for sure.
Perfect. So Liliana, and I thought this was an interesting and timely question. I'm curious to know how goal setting has been impacted by the pandemic, because I've been hesitant to set longer term goals since there are too many variables right now, and I find it hard to plan.
Yeah, I can really appreciate that. And I think that a lot of people in your shoes as manager are having the same issues, because things are so flexible right now, or so they're still unpredictable. We don't know if we're going back to work. A lot of organizations don't know if they're going back to work 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week. So I hear what you're saying, but as much as possible, I would recommend that things be as concrete as possible for people. So where you can make plans and determine goals, do so.
Okay, wonderful, Jane. Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. Jane, this was really, an hour goes by really quickly. I know that's a lot of excellent information that could be applied right now, and certainly and you're getting comments about how good the session was. Certainly things that are not easily applicable, let me rephrase, but that can be applied, that you give tools that certainly can be applied right away for managers. It certainly changed my view of managing and looking at some of the things that we don't, when you're putting out fires all day, you don't always consider some of these other more coaching related tactics, or I don't like to use tactic strategies, I should say instead. So thank you so much. And you're getting lots of thanks for this session, Jane. Everyone, this is on the CATS Career Advising and Transition Services Facebook page. And we will be contacting all registrants to Power Skills and giving them our YouTube video handle when all our videos are up, but give us about 2 to 3 weeks to do that and we'll get them all there. So they will also be placed there. Thank you all for your engagement and for your comments here. And I will just leave with one comment from the chat from Vincenzo, who says, I found this presentation extremely useful. Thank you, Jane. Whoa, it went up there. In my opinion, coaching is the best job one could have. So yeah, I think that's a nice thing to lead on. And Emily put some of the links in the chat. So thanks again to Jane. We hope to see you. It was her first participation at Power Skills. We hope to see you at future Power Skills. And I think, coaching instead of managing is a wonderful, or instead of bossing is a power skill. So I think that's a perfect fit. And enjoy the rest of your day, Jane and everyone. And thank you so much for being at this session.
Thanks, Rosalie, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emily.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you so much. What a great session. Take
Thanks.
care, everyone.